So the first of the factions of the Mu'tazilah, which is the 41st out of the 73 factions, they're called Al-Wasiliyah. They are the followers of a man named Wasil ibn Ata al-Ghazal. He is the head of the Mu'tazilah and the first one to call the people to their heresy. Though he's not the first denier of destiny. So there were Qadariyyah before him, but they were not able to spread their da'wah. Like one, his name is Ma'bad, and another one whose name is Ghaylan. That one, Ghaylan, there's a story about him with Umar bin Abdul Aziz. Umar bin Abdul Aziz summoned him. So he came, and Umar bin Abdul Aziz said to him, "What is this that has reached me about you, Ghaylan? You deny the Qadar?" Ghaylan was scared. He said, "No, they lie on me, Amir al-Mu'mineen. They say about me what I did not say." And he was lying. And then there was a discourse between them. And Ghaylan said that he believes in the Qadar. And then Umar bin Abdul Aziz, he made dua. He said, "Oh Allah, if he is giving me with his tongue, contrary to what is in his heart, then make him taste the heat of the sword." And then Ghaylan, he didn't dare to talk about the Qadar as long as Umar bin Abdul Aziz was alive. When he died, he started talking about the Qadar again. So then he was summoned by the next caliph. They wanted to execute him, but he said, "Give me someone who will debate with me, and if he defeats me, then so be it. And if I defeat him, then do with him whatever you do with me." So they said, "Who's going to take care of this Qadari?" So the people said, "Al-Awza'i." So they summoned Al-Awza'i, and Al-Awza'i debated with him. And then at the end, Al-Awza'i said, "Kafirun wa rabbil ka'bati ya Amir al-Mu'mineen." He's a kafir. I swear by the Lord of the Kaaba. Damuhu fi unuqi. He said, "This man, his blood is lawful, and I take responsibility. You can execute him, and if you're wrong, I take responsibility for it." That's what Al-Awza'i said. Damuhu fi unuqi. His blood is on my neck. He's a kafir. Execute him. So Wasil, he was not the first denier of Qadar. There were before him some. But those like Ma'bad and Ghaylan, they used to hide what they had, and they were not able to expose it. And when they did expose that at the end of the era of the companions, in the last days of the companions, when they showed what they believed outwardly, nobody followed them, and they were shunned. So they didn't have a big influence, as opposed to this man, Wasil ibn Ata. This one, Wasil ibn Ata, he used to be among those who went to the lessons of Al-Hasan al-Bisri. You know Al-Hasan al-Bisri? Some considered him the best of the Tabi'un, the greatest of the Tabi'un. What's correct is that Uwais al-Qarani was the best of the Tabi'un, because there's a hadith about that. The Prophet ﷺ spoke about him without meeting him, and that's one of the Prophet's miracles. Uwais al-Qarani. But some scholars said Al-Hasan al-Bisri, he's the greatest of the Tabi'un, the followers of the companions. And some scholars even said, yeah, Uwais, he's the best. That's what came in the hadith. And those who said that Al-Hasan al-Bisri is the best, or someone else, they meant like the greatest scholar. That's what they meant. Not like what the Prophet meant when he said Uwais is the best. So anyway, that lets you know what a high status has Al-Hasan al-Bisri. He's the one that in the books, when they say Al-Hasan said, they meant Al-Hasan al-Bisri. So Wasil, he used to be amongst the people who would go to the lessons of Al-Hasan al-Bisri in the masjid. And he was keeping what he believed in secret, meaning his belief in the Qadar. And at that time, the people were of two factions. the companions and the tabi'un and all of Ahlus Sunnah, they were saying that whoever's a believer and he believes in the oneness of Allah and he has a correct belief, but he commits a major sin, then he's still a believer. And that his sin does not take him out of the religion. They said the actions of his organs do not negate the faith of his heart. That's the belief of the companions and the tabi'un and all of Ahlus Sunnah. The actions of one's organs, meaning the sins that he commits by his organs, do not negate the faith in his heart. On the other hand, the Khawarij were saying that whoever commits a major sin goes out of faith, he enters into blasphemy, and he's a kafir with the other kuffar, and if he dies like that, he will be in hell forever. So then came this man Wasil, and he wanted to disagree with both groups, and he wanted to come with something in the middle. So he said, different from Ahlus Sunnah. Ahlus Sunnah said the major sinner is a believer. So he said the major sinner is not a believer. And he wanted to say different from the Khawarij. They said the major sinner is a kafir. So he said the major sinner is not a kafir. So then what is he? So he said the major sinner is in a station between the two stations. Huwa fi manzilatin bayna al-manzilatayn. He's in a status or a station between the two. What is that? According to him, it is the status of fisq, major sin. So he's a fasiq, not a believer, not a mu'min, not a kafir, but a fasiq. However, they did not completely disagree with the Khawarij. There was still something that the Khawarij said that they agreed with, which is what? The Khawarij said the fasiq, the major sinner, he's a kafir, so he didn't agree with that. He didn't say he's a kafir. But they said, the Khawarij said, if he dies like that, he will be in hell forever. And the Wasiliyah agreed with that. The Mu'tazilah, they agreed with that. They said, well, he's not a kafir, he's a fasiq, but if he dies like that, he will be in hell forever. And then he added, and it's not permissible for Allah to forgive him. So the Muslims shunned him. Al-Hasan al-Bisri, when he knew about what this man was believing, he kicked him out of his session. He didn't allow him to sit in his session anymore. So he, with those who agreed with him, they went to another side of the masjid. So they withdrew from the Muslims and they were shunned by the Muslims. So they were called Al-Mu'tazilah. And Wasil said more than that. And for this reason, the Muslims called them Makhanith al-Khawarij. Makhanith al-Khawarij. That means the hermaphrodite Khawarij. It's like a way to say the sissies, the sissified Khawarij. Or I could say a harsher word, which I would not put into the lessons. They said those guys, they were the sissy versions of the Khawarij. Because, for two reasons. They said, because one, the Khawarij said, if you commit a sin or a major sin, you're a kafir and we'll kill you. So they got up to fight the Muslims while the Mu'tazilah didn't get up to fight the Muslims. So that made them sissies in comparison to the Khawarij. And the Khawarij said, you're a kafir, actually. And they said, no, he's not a kafir. So they weren't willing to go the distance that the Khawarij were. So from that perspective, also they were sissies in comparison to the Khawarij. The way they fought the Muslims was through debate, not through murder. While the Khawarij, they got up to kill people and fight people. One whose name is Ishaq ibn Suwaid, he deemed the Mu'tazilah a type of Khawarij. He said two lines of poetry. He said, برئت من الخوارج لست منهم من الغزال منهم وابن بابي ومن قوم إذا ذكروا عليا يردون السلام على السحاب. He said, I have nothing to do with the Khawarij. I am not from amongst them. I have nothing to do with Al-Ghazal amongst those Khawarij, and I have nothing to do with Ibn Bab amongst those Khawarij. Ibn Bab, will mention him, inshallah, in a moment. So he said, I have nothing to do with those Khawarij. Lastu minhumu. I am not one of them. Min al-Ghazali minhum. I'm not with Al-Ghazal amongst those Khawarij. Wabni Babi. I'm not with Ibn Bab amongst those Khawarij. وَمِن قَوْمٍ إِذَا ذَكَرُوا عَلِيًّا. And I have nothing to do with some people that whenever they mention Imam Ali, يَرُدُّونَ السَّلَامَ عَلَى السَّحَابِ. They give salam to the clouds because they believe that Imam Ali was in the clouds. He means the Saba'iyyah. The Saba'iyyah, who are the precursors to the Shiites. And we didn't really tell the story of the Saba'iyyah because the Saba'iyyah are not really Shiites, but they are the precursors to the Shiites. In this book that we're studying, there is a section about the different cults, just for the different cults that may have appeared to be Shiites or may have appeared to be Mu'tazilah, for example, but they were so far in their misguidance that they were cults and not even deemed amongst the 73 factions. So we'll get to them, inshallah, after we finish talking about the 73 factions. Actually, we'll talk about 72 factions, then we'll talk about those, then we'll talk about the 73rd faction, which is Ahlul Sunnah, inshallah. And this man, Wasil ibn Ata, he has other innovations. The 42nd faction out of the 73 is a group called Al-Amriyyah. They are the followers of Amr ibn Ubaid. He's Ibn Bab. So this one, Amr ibn Ubaid, he was Wasil's henchman, his minion. He agreed with Wasil, and then he added to what Wasil innovated. And he got his own faction. They talked about the people who fought Imam Ali. Wasil did also. I just said Wasil has other innovations too. So they have an issue about whether those who fought Imam Ali were trustworthy or not. And they have some talk that, to be honest with you, I don't want to discuss it. It's just a little, could possibly be confusing. And they have some details that they talk about as if they have some fiqh. Is it that one of those groups is sinful or both of them, but not one in particular? Some silly things that they say. Maybe another time, insha'Allah ta'ala, we'll delve into that. But among those, Mu'tazilah was a group called Al-Hudhaliyah, the followers of Abu al-Hudayl, whose name is Muhammad ibn al-Hudayl, and he's known as Al-Allaf. He has many heresies. His case was so bad, his kufr was so abundant that everyone deemed him as a kafir, Ahlul Sunnah deemed him as a kafir, and all of the Mu'tazilah deemed him as a kafir. One Mu'tazili named Al-Mirdar, he wrote a book to refute Abu al-Hudayl and call him a kafir. And Al-Jubba'i also, you should know the name of Al-Jubba'i. He's one of the Mu'tazilites who have a frequent mentioning in the books, one of the more famous ones. And he's the uncle of Al-Ash'ari. He's the one that actually Al-Ash'ari grew up in his house, Al-Jubba'i. So remember that one, and remember all of them. Al-Jubba'i also wrote a book to refute Abu al-Hudayl and to call him a kafir. And he said that Abu Hudayl's talk aids the atheists. His beliefs, his arguments aid the atheists. Like what? What did he say? He said that there shall come a time when what is under the power of Allah there shall no longer be anything under the power of Allah. He said, there will come a time when there will no longer be anything under the power of Allah. And when there is nothing under his power, he will not have the power to do anything. That's atheism. It's like veiling atheism or hiding it. He said, when that time comes, the enjoyment of the people of paradise will stop, and the torture of the people of hell will stop, and the Creator will not have the power to increase their pleasure in any way, not even by a particle. And that he will not be able to increase the torture of the people of hell even by a particle. And when that time comes, then the power of the people of paradise will vanish also. Their own created power will vanish. And when that time comes, had someone been in paradise, according to him, reaching for a fruit, to take that fruit, so he's extending his hand towards the fruit, and then the time when Allah no longer has power over anything comes, then that person will just freeze in his spot. And he won't be able to move. And everyone in paradise will be frozen. And the torture of hell will stop. And the pleasure of paradise will stop. And Allah will not have the power to do anything. And he won't even have the power to enable them to do anything. Abu al-Muzaffar says, if some of his followers attempt to veil this crooked belief of his, they would be unable to. They cannot hide it because he documented it in numerous works of his. He has a book called Al-Hujjaj, and he has other books. I don't know if they're available today. The book that we're going over is now over 900 years old. But he had a book called Al-Hujjaj, and he had other books, and he documented that. And they said that his books pave way for the atheists and gives them arguments against the Muslims. And he used to believe in something that we talked about when we mentioned the Khawarij. If you remember, there's a group of Khawarij called Ashabu Ta'atin La Yuradu Biha Allah. The people who believe in obedience that is not intended for Allah. And we did mention, when we mentioned it then, that they believe in that like some of the Mu'tazilah. So this man, he believed in obedience that's not for the sake of Allah. And so he said, there is no disbeliever, no irreligious person, no atheist, except that he is actually to Allah amongst the highest ranking of slaves, like a high saint in many, many things, because he doesn't have to correct his intention and Allah will not torture him. That's blasphemy. And also among his crooked beliefs is that the knowledge of Allah is Allah. And that the power of Allah is Allah. And this is invalid because it cannot be said that Allah is his attributes like that. It cannot be said that Allah is power, Allah is knowledge, Allah is will, Allah is sight. That's invalid. That's blasphemy, actually. And if Allah was knowledge, then Allah is not knowledgeable. And if Allah was power, then Allah would not be powerful, because knowledge is not knowledgeable, and power is not powerful. And then, had that been the case, then his knowledge would be his power, because he's saying that Allah's knowledge is him, and his power is him. Then it would mean that his knowledge is his power. And this is all blasphemy. Anyone have any question? Say, can I give an example about the power? Yeah. So you have something called an attribute. There's something called an attribute, and there's something called a description. So in order to have the description, you have to have the attribute. So the description is not the attribute. They're not the same. So for example, knowledge or power, let's say power, that's what you're asking about. Power is an attribute. So if someone has power, then his description is that he's powerful. Not the power is powerful. The one who has the power is powerful. So he's saying that Allah is power. So if Allah has power, then he's not powerful. You understand? And if Allah is knowledge, then he's not knowledgeable, because knowledge is not knowledgeable. The one who has knowledge is knowledgeable. And like that, like for example, we creations, we move. So motion is an attribute, and the one who has it is moving. He's described as moving. But motion doesn't move. The one who has motion moves. It's not the motion that moves, it's the one who has the motion who's described with moving. So by saying that Allah is his attribute, then he'll be denying Allah's description. Do you understand? Yeah, power is not the description. Description means adjective. So you have an attribute and you have an adjective, which is a descriptive name. Allah has power, so he is powerful. He has knowledge, so he's knowledgeable. He has life, so he's living. And like that. He has hearing, so he's a hearer. He has sight, so he's a seer. So if someone says Allah is sight, then he's not a seer then. If he is life, then he's not alive, etc. That's clear, inshallah. And he has many, many other heresies that we won't mention. We don't even have them mentioned here. Some actually are here and I'm skipping them. And others are not here, but they are mentioned in Al-Farqu Bayn Al-Firaq. Many, many, many things. This guy was a kafir. Yani, one can see from these beliefs that we just mentioned about him that he's an atheist. This is why Imam Abu Yusuf, Judge Abu Yusuf, the companion of Abu Hanifa, he said that the Mu'tazilah are zanadiqah. That means they're atheists, irreligious atheists, atheistic. And the 44th faction is called An-Nazamiyyah. They are the followers of one who's called Abu Ishaq Ibrahim ibn Sayyar. Yani his name is Ibrahim ibn Sayyar. And his nickname was An-Nazam. The Mu'tazila claim that, yani his followers, they claim that the reason he's called An-Nazam, Nazam means like arranger. Even could mean like orchestrator. Someone who arranges something. So the Mu'tazila say he's called An-Nazam because of how nice he could speak, whether it was prose or poetry. And this is not true. Rather, he's called An-Nazam because he used to work in the market of Al-Basra and his job was to string beads. He was a bead stringer. That's why he was called An-Nazam. And he would sell them. In his youth, he used to hang out with the Thanawiyah, those people who believe in two gods. They say one is light and one is dark. And he used to hang with the Sumaniyah, those who don't even believe in prophets. So those were the types of people who used to hang out with this guy, An-Nazam. And when he got older, he hung out with the philosophers, the atheistic type of philosophers. And among his beliefs was that he used to deny the indivisible particle. An-Nazam, he said that a piece can be split, like a mustard seed can be split, broken into pieces forever and ever without ever stopping. You could take that mustard seed and split it, and then take a piece and split it, and take a piece and split it, and keep going forever and ever, and never stop splitting. And if someone takes that idea and follows it all the way through, it's a way to say that the world has no beginning. That's blasphemy. Had it been that a mustard seed could be split infinitely, and also, according to him, a great mountain would also be able to be split infinitely, then there wouldn't be any difference between a mustard seed and a mountain, because both of them could be split infinitely according to him, and what's infinite cannot be greater than what's infinite. And that one Abul Hudayl that we just finished talking about, he had a debate with An-Nazam. Hope you're going to remember those names, Abul Hudayl, An-Nazam, and me too, and Wasil ibn Ata. Did you already forget the names of the Shiites? The Kaysanis, the Zaydis, and the Imamis. Who's the leader of the Kaysanis? Mukhtar. And all of those ones. Anyway, you'll review insha'Allah ta'ala. So Abul Hudayl had a debate with An-Nazam about this mas'ala. And he said to An-Nazam, if every piece of a body, since a body is going to be made of many particles, and according to An-Nazam, each particle can be split infinitely. So Abul Hudayl told him, if every particle of a body could be split infinitely, then an ant would never be able to traverse, cross, get from one end to the other end, to get from one end of a sprout, like a cabbage or a lettuce, a head of cabbage or a head of lettuce, for example, or something even smaller. If every particle of a body could be split infinitely, Abul Hudayl told An-Nazam, then an ant would never be able to traverse a sprout. He would never be able to, for example, walk from one part of a head of cabbage to another, because he would have to cross infinite particles just to get across that cabbage or lettuce, or what's even smaller than that. So what did An-Nazam say? He said, well, the ant, he will leap sometimes. Sometimes he has to take a leap. So he became a laughing stock, An-Nazam, when he gave that answer. That the ant takes leaps so that he can get across that sprout. وَالْعِيَاذُ بِاللَّهِ تَبَارَكَ وَتَعَالَى. That's what happens when you believe in other than the belief of Ahlul Sunnah. And among the beliefs of An-Nazam is that, according to him, it's obligatory on Allah to do what is best for the slaves. And that if he does not do what is best for the slaves, he would be miserly. And then based on that, he said, so everything that Allah did for the kafir, that was for his benefit. That was for his welfare. Whatever he was, whatever situation he was in, whatever Allah did for that kafir, that was for his benefit, because according to him, it's obligatory on Allah to do what is best for the slaves. And this is like the belief of some Christians who say God does not create anything bad. He only creates what is good. He doesn't create any evil, and he doesn't create any harm. That's blasphemy. You say to such a person, who created the tsunamis? Who created the earthquakes? Who made the animals get sick and made the babies get sick? Who created the scorpions? According to An-Nazam, Allah Ta'ala did what is best for the slave, even the kafir. And whatever he did for that kafir, according to An-Nazam, Allah doesn't have the power to do better than that. He already did what is best for him. Blasphemy. Can you imagine meeting someone like that? I don't know about you, but I would really hate somebody who talked like that about Allah. You think you hate a Wahhabi? A'udhu billah. According to this, though, such a belief would lead to refuting Allah. Such a belief would lead to refuting Allah and leaving Allah without an answer. How so? Imam al-Ash'ari, he gave the proof for that. with Al-Jubba'i. He refuted Al-Jubba'i in this mas'ala, which is that take the scenario of three. A believer, a grown believer, that's one, a grown believer who worshipped Allah, he spent his life worshiping Allah. Two, a child, and three, a kafir, a grown kafir. Take these three. So that grown believer who lived his life in obedience, Allah will admit him to paradise and make him among the high ranking. But the child, he didn't do the obedience that the grown one did, so he wouldn't, even though he would be admitted to paradise, he wouldn't have the high status that the grown Muslim obedient one has. So why would that one have a better situation than the other one if Allah is obligated to do what's best for everyone? So then the child would say, "Oh Allah, why didn't you let me live longer so that I could attain the status of this other one? And that would be better for me." So Al-Jubba'i said, Allah would say to that child, "I knew that if I let you live, you would have died as a kafir. So I made you die as a child because that was better for you." And then the kafir would say, "Oh Allah, why didn't you make me die as a child so that I wouldn't be tortured in hell forever?" Then Allah himself wouldn't even have an answer for that. A'udhu billahi ta'ala. That's blasphemy. As for Ahlul Sunnah, we say Allah does whatever he wills. That's it. He's not obligated to do anything. He doesn't have to do anything for anyone. When Allah blesses us and endows upon us, and when he gives us money and gives us health and gives us safety, we praise him and thank him. That was generosity. And when Allah makes us sick and makes our loved ones die and makes us poor and puts us in hard situation, we praise Allah Ta'ala and we ask him for his mercy. That's the way of the believers. Not to say Allah has to do what's best for me, and if he doesn't, then he's such and such. And among the claims of this man, An-Nazam, is that the Quran is not miraculous. And he denied all the miracles of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam. He denied the splitting of the moon, although it's mentioned in the Quran. He said the Quran is not miraculous. He said that the splitting of the moon didn't happen, and that's although it's in the Quran when Allah said, اقتربت الساعة وانشق القمر, which means Judgment Day has drawn near and the moon was split. He denies that. That's kufr. And he denied that the pebbles used to mention Allah in the Prophet's hands. He denied that the water sprang from between the Prophet's fingers, alayhi salatu wassalam. Would someone like that be a Muslim? For sure he's not a Muslim. That's not a Muslim. He doesn't believe in Allah. He doesn't believe in the Prophet. And then he backs all of that up with a lot of kufr. A lot of detailed kufr. And a lot of imaginary kufr. And so inwardly, this man was inclined towards the way of the Barahima, those who don't believe in prophets. They said prophets are pointless. The Barahima, originally Barahima are Indian philosophers. There's philosophers from all cultures, but the most famous philosophers were the Greek ones. But there are philosophers from all cultures. Even the Arabs had philosophers. The Indians had philosophers. The Chinese had philosophers. So the Barahima, those are some Indian philosophers. They don't believe in prophets. They say prophets are pointless. There's no need for prophets because we have minds. That's their claim. So An-Nazam, he, by talking about things being, bodies being able to be split forever, he denies that the world has a beginning, indirectly. He indirectly denies that the world has a beginning. So that's atheism. And by denying the miracles of the Prophet alayhi salatu wassalam, he's denying prophethood altogether, because if a prophet doesn't have a miracle, then how do we know he's a prophet? And he also didn't like the idea of being bound to do obligations. He didn't like the idea of having obligations on him. And he used to deny the consensus. He said the consensus is no evidence. And he said mutawatir reports are not evidence. And he used to reject everything that the Sahaba said. And he used to deny and reject everything that the Sahaba agreed about. And his lifestyle was a lifestyle of sin. And he was an alcoholic, and he died drunk, as it was said. He died intoxicated. There are some different reports about how he died, so Allah knows best. Also, different Mu'tazilah authored books to refute him. Abu al-Hudayl, he wrote a book in which he refuted An-Nazam, Abu al-Hudayl, that misguided one. Also another one called Al-Iskafi, he authored a book to refute An-Nazam. And another one named Ja'far ibn Harb. All of them misguided Mu'tazilah are refuting An-Nazam, just like they refuted Abu al-Hudayl. And we'll see at the end, when we finish talking about the groups of the Mu'tazilah, they all deemed each other kuffar, every single one of them. And what we mentioned here of his misguidances is just a little bit. Also in Al-Farqu Bayn Al-Firaq, he gives much more. And we'll stop there. Wallahu tabaraka wa ta'ala a'lam.